Hello, welcome to Conversation Starters. I'm your moderator, Fessa Ilonge, and I am thrilled that you could join us for another wonderful episode of Conversation Starters for fall 2022. For tonight's topic, we will be discussing the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in faculty recruitment. Joining me this evening for a wonderful conversation are two expert scholars that are going to share their insight into this topic. The first panelist joining me this evening is Kiara Ozan, who is a director of diversity initiatives for Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Her research interests focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher ed. I welcome you, Ms. Ozan.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Our next panelist joining us this evening is Dr. Erica Cooper, who is the Assistant Provost of Faculty Diversity at Virginia Tech. Her research interests include intersection between racial identity and legal discourse. I welcome you, Dr. Cooper.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
All right, so I want to go ahead and jump right in because this is a much needed topic, especially in this current society that we're in. So the first question that I have is, why are diversity, equity, and inclusion important in faculty recruitment? I'll start with you, Dr. Cooper.
Sure, absolutely. The faculty recruitment process is complex. It's fairly complex. There's a lot of factors that, departments and universities take into consideration when identifying potential candidates and extending offers to join that faculty. Oftentimes, the process is also equally mired with implicit biases related to diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. So feeling as though faculty that don't have a particular pedigree are not necessarily as significant or will be less successful as they, continue their tenure throughout their professional careers. In other cases, it's also a bias against the research produced by the faculty. Or the assumption that the faculty will be underproductive. And that creates, this tension in terms of being able to really identify fundamentally the best, most talented, person to fill that particular position. And so, working through or being very mindful about the challenges associated with the recruitment process fundamentally is key. Recognizing, some of the existing problems that interfere with a college or a department's ability to really fulfill that obligation is something that's often ignored. And so what we try to do is we really want to focus on, bringing attention to those challenges so that, at the end of the day, we all have the same goal, which is being able to identify the best possible person, the most talented individual to continue to advance the great work within that department and reflect positively on the institution, and also to serve as role models and guide the students that are affiliated with that space.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Cooper. Ms. Ozan.
I agree with everything Dr. Cooper said. I would also say that in fields, particularly STEM disciplines, it's crucial that we institute the policies and the process and the accountability that goes along with faculty hiring, or that needs to go along with faculty hiring, because we haven't had the outcomes, right? That we as institutions or as a field of higher education have said that we want. So we're not achieving the progress that is needed and required for some of these disciplines to continue to thrive in the same way. And so we need, especially we need it in all fields, in higher education, but particularly in STEM and particularly around climate science, we need the best and the brightest minds, right? Our destinies are intertwined, and we're not going to get there if we don't have the students in the pipeline. And part of putting the students in the pipeline is ensuring that there's a diverse faculty where those students can see themselves. And so increasing faculty diversity and having a process that allows faculty to want to be at institutions that have previously excluded them, that creates a safe space for those faculty to thrive once they're there, is also really important, so that the students are able to come to those institutions and thrive and be successful as well.
And I would just, add to Ms. Ozan's perspective. I mean, I 100% agree, but just the criticality of knowledge, the evolution, the natural flow, or the natural progression of a discipline. New ideas, new perspectives, new experiences are critical to that natural process. And without recognizing that, existing policies that, limit the possibility of that naturally evolving, the end result will be, the death of that discipline. And fundamentally, that will, that is detrimental, to the work that we do in higher education, and it's a disservice to the society as well. And so there are many reasons why, this topic of faculty recruitment and ensuring that we do have a diverse perspective and promoting and supporting equity and inclusion throughout that process is critical.
No, thank you. Thank you both for those wonderful pieces and of insights that you shared. And just a disclaimer to our audience members tuning in. Just a reminder that as our guests share their intellectual property, please give them proper credit for their contributions. So let's jump into the next question. What are some benefits and challenges in the promotion of diversity, equity, and inclusion in recruitment strategies? Ms. Ozan.
I will again piggyback off Dr. Cooper in the benefits are clearly the infusion of new ideas, new perspectives. Again, when we're talking about research and academia, what questions we're even asking, right? Really, really, really depends on who's asking those questions, right? And who's in the room when those questions are being discussed. And so the benefits are benefits not only to the field, but again, to society. And so the challenges, though, are this false perception, this false desire to present ourselves as a meritocracy, as institutions that are built on equity and access and diversity of thought, right? As opposed to diversity of background and diversity of socioeconomic status and diversity of perspective. And so I think the benefits definitely outweigh the challenges, and it's worth the endeavor. I think that institutions can do what they say, right, they want to do, but they have to actually allow the process to be infused with checks and balances. They have to be willing to do the extra effort. I often hear folks refer to this extra effort that we have to go through to recruit diverse students and diverse faculty. And it's, you do have to do extra effort. You do have to have a more competitive package, because we are competitive candidates. And as institutions are recognizing our value and how their institutions are lagging behind, right, and getting left behind, they are also seeking to diversify. And so we do have to also be careful when we talk about the challenges of tokenization, right? So is this person being selected so that this department can finally check the box and stop having that discussion? That's where the real accountability starts, is who comes next, and how are those pioneers, right? Those path makers set up for success so that others can follow behind.
Thank you, Ms. Ozan. Dr. Cooper.
I, agree 100% with what Ms. Ozan shared. I think, there are a lot of benefits that we can talk about from, just looking at the situation from a pedagogical standpoint. Faculty who are diverse, research shows that they typically design more active learning environments that are beneficial to students writ large. So not just diverse students, but the majority students as well. And so that is, a benefit to the larger community. In addition to that, students, as Ms. Ozan mentioned before, who are diverse themselves, it is so critical for them to see or to have representation of the possibilities, because, our future scientists, engineers, doctors, lawyers, key thought leaders, right? Would not even imagine the possibility without being able to recognize that there are people in those spaces that are doing this great work. And also, the opportunity for them to engage with faculty, that they can feel comfortable with sharing their desires. Often, you see majority faculty not necessarily exercising consideration or empathy for students who are struggling because they are different or being the singlet. And that's a lot of pressure, for often an 18 or 19-year-old to carry on the weight of their shoulders. And, the majority professors not necessarily are lacking the ability or the experience to be able to help those students successfully navigate the space. And so having diverse representation certainly fills that void, and once again helps the students and the institution, but contributes long term to the development of that pipeline, in terms of future scholarship and the dissemination of it to the next generations of students. I agree 100% also as it relates to the challenges. I think the biggest challenge probably is this dichotomy between merit and diversity. People thinking that, if you're diverse, you're somehow inferior, and not necessarily recognizing that diversity is not something that can be disconnected with talent, or the talent having to prove themselves above and beyond the non-diverse candidate. That's, another critical challenge, that, the bar is set a lot higher, and there's less room for mistake or error for talented, diverse individuals. And lastly, I would say, some of the challenges with recruitment of diverse candidates is that they typically lack the important or critical mentorship throughout their educational careers. And so they're somewhat diamonds in the rough. Mm-hmm. And, they're coming into the space at a disadvantage. Maybe it's resources, maybe it's also networks, especially in, at an institution like Virginia Tech, where, research is the currency for everything that you do, your identity, correct? And so if you have not been, if you've never been really supported or encouraged by your faculty advisors, they've just helped you get through the process as a student, but not necessarily helped you frame perceivably what the next steps of your future could be or should be, or how to get there, you're at a really key disadvantage. And I think that creates a lot of frustration once, diverse candidates go into faculty positions that they don't really know how to navigate the space. And it takes them a long time to figure things out. And then by the time they figure things out, when they're on the tenure clock, it's too late, because they're not reaching those metrics, that are associated with receiving tenure. And for some, in these departments, that fulfills their, what they believe to be true about the diverse candidate anyway, that they weren't good enough to begin with. And it's really, they weren't good enough to begin with, but they did need some additional support and mentoring to help them be successful. They're fully capable of being able to do the work, but they just don't know where to even begin in order to be successful. And so I would say some of those, those challenges, are equally present when diverse, students and postdocs are thinking about the next step. They're looking at, the departments and seeing there's little diversity, and they're not necessarily willing to be the pioneer,
Mm-hmm.
take that first step, because that is a huge responsibility. And they, choose alternate career paths. And so I think a lot of these challenges are interwoven to create a really ugly nebulous of obstacles that adversely affect our ability to really achieve the goal, once again, of bringing in the best and the brightest.
I'll just quickly add. I know we have other questions to get to, but I will just say, Dr. Cooper's point about the ugliness, right? I think in the past couple of years, there's been a lot more transparency about that ugliness, and how and students of color, communities of color are saying, academia is not for me. I can go be successful elsewhere in industry and government, in other spaces, and not have to deal with this trauma, not have to continue the trauma that I'm currently experiencing as an undergrad or a graduate student. I'm going to go elsewhere for my health, my mental, emotional safety. And so we are also combating a climate of battle scars, right? And battle stories. And so we do need to have more success stories coming out. We do need to have more institutions investing and elevating and highlighting and ensuring the success of the faculty that they have recruited and retaining. So the retention piece, and we'll probably talk a little bit about that. But we need more success stories, right? And we need more visibility of those success stories in order for those students to continue to see academia as a viable pathway for them.
No, thank you, Ms. Ozan and Dr. Cooper. And you really dove into that question, and you highlighted the plethora of the benefits and challenges. So thank you for your insight and your feedback. I know we tapped into this a little bit with this question, but the next question that I have for you all is, how significant is diverse representation towards Black scholarship? Dr. Cooper.
Sure. Just as a point of clarification, are you asking whether whether we should take into consideration the impact of diversity on the production of research and scholarship?
Yes. So definitely in that direction.
Sure, absolutely. So, I mean, as I mentioned before, knowledge is not static. And if you imagine some of the key, what we consider to be the pivotal, theories of knowledge about the world, scientific and social and otherwise, right? Those were individuals who were challenging the norm. They were pushing the envelope. And often, if you look at those stories in terms of how that theory got to where it was written with controversy and pushback and difficulty. And then the recognition, of course, that, hey, as it continued to be tested and shown to be valid, the recognition that it should be recognized. And it does add it does provide an important contribution to our understanding of the world around us. And I see, this conversation very much in the same way as it relates to Black scholarship, or, scholarship from, diverse perspectives, that often that scholarship is marginalized within the dominant fields associated with those individuals, where it's considered to be, not cutting edge, or it's, you find a lot of microaggressive macro invalidations thrown in that direction. But if you examine it very carefully, it does outline or highlight, critical nuances that have gone under, discovered or under explored, and they need to be brought to the forefront for us to be able to resolve or address them successfully. I mean, I think that's important for our natural evolution as human beings. And so it is critical that, that we recognize the important, contributions of, Black scholarship, regardless of the discipline. It should not just be relegated to Africana studies or African American studies departments, but a recognition that it also adds something substantively to the respective disciplines of those, scholars themselves. Whether you're a political science, for me, I'm a communication scholar. If you are even in the STEM fields, that there is a space and a place and an important contribution that you're making to those respective disciplines from the standpoint, from your standpoint, being a diverse scholar. So I think this is a conversation about really dismantling, the gatekeeping system that has been traditionally the major source of influence, but then also isolation and stagnation when it comes down to advancing knowledge across the board.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Ms. Ozan.
Again, Dr. Cooper's points are right on point. I will only add that it's also just really critical to address the historical and current inequities, global, right, inequities, but also domestic inequities. And so part of the highlighting and the as Dr. Cooper said, the elimination of the gatekeeping of that scholarship is that often students of color and Black students are included in this as well. We're trying to understand what's happening, right? We're trying to understand what our lived experience has been, what has been the experience of our parents and our ancestors throughout the world, right? Throughout the African diaspora. And so part of being able to gain that understanding, regardless of what discipline you're in, is being able to actually connect with other scholars who are investigating similar topics or similar areas. But because there is that isolation, because there is that undervaluing, these students are often placed in situations where there is no mentorship because no one's asking those questions. No one's thinking about those communities, and those questions have been tossed to the side. And so again, the how do we move forward as a society? How do we move forward as a community? Part of that is being granted access, right, and given space and validation that the issues that affect our lives, regardless of the discipline, one, they're interconnected with everyone else. I'm going to keep saying that because I think that that's a core component of why the participation of Black scholars in every field is essential, is because our destinies are intertwined, and the ideas and the knowledge and the innovations that have come from the Black community and the Black experience are priceless, right? And we need to continue to invest in that. And so the value of diverse representation towards Black scholarship not only advances the Black community and our needs and our interests and our potential, but it does so for the world writ large.
I just wanted to comment that last point was pivotal. I think it's often under overlooked, certainly devalued, those contributions that Black scholars have made, across the board to, the world around us, whether it's, contributions to medicine or to science. We often do not, recognize or acknowledge those significant innovations and contributions to advance the disciplines to where they are currently today. And that needs to be acknowledged for what it is, and it needs to be challenged as it continues to occur. And it should not be something that is like, oh, you're just angry, or we can just move on, and finding ways to, diminish the concern when it is raised. And so, yeah, I 100% agree. And I just wanted to really highlight that point, because I think it's the key to that question.
No, thank you both. I mean, the responses and the insight you all are sharing is so profound, and just reaching out to our audience members. If you are enjoying this conversation, please feel free to share, like, and comment with your professional networks, colleagues, and friends on how much you're enjoying this conversation, and ask some questions. We have two wonderful scholars here that are ready to share their insight. So the next question that I have is, how does diversity, equity, and inclusion influence academic achievement? Ms. Ozan.
Yeah, this is a big one. I think it piggybacks again off of our previous questions, in that a lack of diversity creates groupthink, limits our options for how the questions are designed, right? What is the core foundation of what it is we're trying to understand, the creativity. And so it's shown, right, that diverse groups are more productive, the innovations are just more outside of the box, that there's more, yes, challenging, right? You're having more challenging conversations, and communication becomes more critical. But when you have a recognition and an appreciation for diverse ways of communicating and diversity of thought, you end up with, right, ultimately more productivity, and then also, like I said, more innovation. And that's what the institutions and departments are seeking, right? The fields are seeking. We want to know what is we're always seeking the next best thing, right? How do we move this conversation forward? How do we solve these social, economic, medical problems, right? How do we get to the solutions? And so part of how do we get to the solutions is we have diverse thinkers, right? Again, we need everyone thinking about climate change. We need everyone thinking about the medical challenges, the pandemics that we're seeing in different waves across the globe. We need everyone thinking about how do we address the economic inequality that persists, right? What are the foundations of those? How do we change the systems and policies in place for the benefit of all? And we've recognized time and time again that when you elevate and support the most vulnerable, you are able to elevate and support and make it better for everyone, right? And so when we talk about how diversity, equity, and inclusion, and that inclusion part is really, really, really key, right? Because we see time and time again institutions checking the box on diversity. We've hired, X faculty from X background. Equity, oh, the numbers are, in proportion to the representation in the broader society or that particular community or that field, right? But the inclusion piece, right, is how those individuals are treated, how they are set up for success. As Dr. Cooper talked about the tenure clock, and how they're just not in the networks, they're not given the inside information, they're not they are not appropriately mentored, right? And they don't have not just mentors, but advocates and sponsors who are going that extra step to say, you are in this field and your success is tied to my success, right? We can both be more successful if we help each other along. And the recognition that part of, I would say, the majority's role in academia right now is to pull that future generation forward, right? So part of as they're aging out, right, and their research is slowing down, they want those research questions to continue. They want someone to continue doing that work. And so I see that in order for that academic achievement to continue and to thrive and to flourish, everyone, but particularly the majority individuals at predominantly white institutions, need to be reaching into communities of color and elevating, supporting, in order to really create a climate and a community that focuses on inclusion of everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Ozanne. Dr. Cooper.
Absolutely. Again, I think Miss Ozanne does a great job of, highlighting all the big issues here. And, I echo everything that she said. I just would add a couple of things to that, or just to highlight a couple of aspects of what she shared, or themes that she shared. As it relates to, I really want to, take a moment to address, of course, the inclusion aspect. I think that's key to any learning environment in academic success. For students, for example, who do not feel connected or feel like they are included, right? That creates, a separation, a disconnection from that learning environment. That can have a ripple effect. So you can imagine that if you're in one class and you're experiencing that, but if that's pretty much the nature of your experience across the board in all of your classes, now you're likely to either start not going to class regularly. You become more and more disengaged from, the reasons why you sought, the advanced education in the first place. And that usually, turns into higher rates of attrition. And, when students are dropping out of college, we all recognize that there are limited opportunities without, college education. And so it has a detrimental effect to the whole life course of an individual that could easily be remedied if we were certainly more mindful about the importance of inclusion as it relates to the quality of the educational environments that we create. And so, it's not just enough to ensure that your environment is diverse. If it can be completely diverse, but if individuals are marginalized, isolated, that's going to adversely affect how they feel about themselves. They will not see themselves as members of that community. And slowly or rapidly, depending on, the nature of the experience, will disengage and separate themselves from the environment. And so it does, create a very vicious cycle that, it's a never ending cycle. I do also recognize that with the, enrollment cliff, with the number of available students, it has become more competitive, institutions, finding themselves feeling as though they need to compete more so for the fewer students that are available. So in terms of the longevity of the institution, this is, a key question, especially smaller institutions that are certainly more vulnerable to, vulnerable to the loss of one or a few students. And, if you garner, of course, the reputation for not being inclusive, that adversely affects your brand, not only in the immediate short term, but also in the long term. And the ability to overcome, that type of reputation may be nearly impossible to achieve. And so, your longevity within this higher education space is certainly directly connected to, the type of educational environments that you provide. And so, being committed to diversity is one thing, but also recognizing that that's just not the end goal. That's just a part of the process, that, creating inclusive and also equitable spaces that, create or develop a sense of belonging fundamentally is the end goal.
No, thank you, Dr. Cooper and Ms. Ozanne. Again, these questions, you all are providing so much insight and really understanding the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion, and all these concepts and topics that we're sharing today. So the next question that I have is, what are effective strategies that academic leaders can implement to promote diverse, equitable, and inclusive recruitment practices of faculty? Ms. Ozanne.
Yeah, I would say that listen to the best practices, right? This is not um, new. This is not unknown how to do this well. There are many institutions who have and thought leaders, right, who have put lots of time and effort into identifying best practices. The challenge, of course, is implementation, right, and getting the buy-in from not only the institutional leaders but from the individual members in that department and the individual members ultimately on that search committee. And so it really has to be that once we've identified the best practices for our department, our institution, and working with, working with the subject matter experts, working with the consultants, working with the professionals who know how to do this, right? Who have studied this, researched it, in the same way that we do in other situations, right? We rely on experts to guide us and to provide insight and strategies and to provide that support along the way. So, for example, at within the UC system, we have faculty equity advisors. Those are individuals who are trained, right, on best practices. They help train the search committee, but having that individual thoroughly integrated into the search process. So they're there not only to say, oh, yeah, you've done this and you've done this, but they're also there to say, hey, let's think about this differently. Did you also think about this, right? And so also having that accountability piece and being willing, right? If the candidate pool isn't diverse, go back out, right? Again, if we say, as with all hiring, that we want to hire the best possible person for this position, we want to bring the best and the brightest minds to our institution and to our department, then take the time to do that right, right? It doesn't have to be rushed. And so we have to break away from these search committees that are shams, right? It's not a real search. They already know who is being picked, and we're going through this process of interviewing folks, and we're causing harm along the way because those young scholars, or not even young scholars, even mid-career scholars of color who participate in those processes and are turned down again and again and again, are exactly what Dr. Cooper said. They will start to isolate, right? And they will start to separate from the communities. And they will start to say, you know what, do I really want to continue in this academic endeavor, or can I go and do something somewhere else where I could be valued? And so again, I just say the best practices are out there. Identify those that are appropriate for your institution, and then actually do your due diligence, put in the hard work and effort, be brave, right? Be different if you have to be, because sometimes that is just doing something differently. And the other part is, this is academia. I always feel as a lawyer, I'm always, especially in the STEM space, I'm just like, your goal is to seek knowledge and to investigate and to question. But when it comes to these things, you somehow lose that ability to implement, right, and to act on what are the best practices, the same way that you would with any other scientific methodology, right? And at the same time, the other piece is accountability. Focus on the outcomes. It's not just that we've tried or that we had a diverse candidate in this pool. If it's not actually translating into outcomes and it's not actually translating into actual hires, you're not doing it, right? And so saying that you're doing it but not actually doing it is again building that detrimental reputation that can take years to undo.
Thank you, Ms. Suzanne. Dr. Cooper.
Sure, absolutely. Best practices certainly are key here. And, as Ms. Ozan shared, there are ample resources available, that you can use to create your own toolkit. I think that, the best practices are certainly a guide. Every institution is different. And I say that because they all have different cultures and climates. And so, that guide or that roadmap has to be customized to the space in which you operate in. It's not just simply add water and stir. Okay, I followed this and I did that and now it didn't work, so I'm done with it. So the recognition of the cultural piece, I would certainly start with, some serious deep dive cultural analysis to figure out, looking at, I would do a SWOT, right? Look at what our strengths, our weaknesses, the opportunities, and our threats. As you have these resources, these best practices resources, you can look at them side by side and work on, addressing those threats and also the weaknesses very strategically. I think Ms. Ozan also, pointed out the need for accountability. I think often that's absent, creating some sort of accountability structure with clear KPIs so that, you are assessing progress, every step of the way. And it's easy to see, where if accountability is missing, which areas within the university those accountability pieces need some additional guidance or support or concern. So I do think that there is, a process, but identifying or just saying, okay, I have a best practices guide without realizing that it's an integration into a larger system of action. That's what's key. And, adopting a plan that allows you to do that. Critically, lastly, I will just add that this work is not just the work for those of us who are identified as diversity leaders on campus. In order to really implement, effective recruitment practices, that's going to require the investment of all key stakeholders. Mm-hmm. This work is just not the work of, the diversity officials or the minority faculty because they are diverse, so we'll shift it onto them and let them come up with a solution for how to lessen their own marginalization. Mm-hmm. But they didn't create their marginalization. And so, the offenders of the marginalized culture need to come to terms with the roles that they play in this whole system and need to work, more collectively in solidarity with the diversity directors and the senior leadership to create, a more inclusive and equitable environment. And in essence, if you can do that, it will be diverse.
The one thing I'll add is the recruitment practices and strategies for recruiting diverse faculty cannot and should be separate from recruitment strategies for the rest of the department. So when you're creating these dual pathways where everyone else is on an escalator getting through and the diverse faculty are trickling in through a diversity hiring, there's still a mismatch of values and policies and practices. And so it really has to be, as Dr. Cooper said, an integration. Right. So what is your faculty hiring plan and how is equity, diversity, and inclusion interwoven into every step of that plan? And that it's not, oh, here's how we hire our scholars, right? And then here's how we bring in our diverse faculty, and that those two processes and those two sets of outcomes are separate. It has to be integrated.
Right. I mean, ultimately, if you are really utilizing best practices, you're going to naturally have diverse pools. Now, of course, there are some disciplines that diversity is more challenging when compared to other disciplines. With that being said, it is still no excuse for consistently your applicant pools to lack any type of diversity. That means that, something in terms of the way in which you're approaching your recruitment is not reaching fully the pool of available talent. And if that's the case, you're doing yourselves a disservice because you don't have access to all of the best and the brightest. And so I would certainly, if there's one, I think, key point that both Ms. Ozan and I agree with is that the best practices are the key. Creating that, whatever that best practice system is the key to ensuring, success. And you will be able to get diverse applicant pools that, have a sense of checks and balances throughout, that recruitment process, to ensure that bias and aggression, microaggressions and invalidations are not, present or disturbing, the committee's ability to really identify and successfully connect with the best possible individual.
I'm just going to add that one of the starting points, though, is broadening what the faculty, the recruitment is, right? And recognizing, so it ties to the undervaluing of Black scholarship or scholarship by diverse scholars. So when you write those job ads really narrowly, right, it's really hard for diverse faculty who have been often on the outskirts or pushed to the margins, right, to fit within that narrow definition of who this particular search committee or department is seeking. And so broadening that scope will help to, because we're not unicorns, right? Diverse scholars, Black scholars exist in every discipline, and there are way more of us than the institutions and higher academia would like us to think, right? But when you write the job ads really narrowly, yes, you're not going to get a very diverse pool because you're writing a job ad for a particular subset of individuals that are already set up for success within the system. And so to be able to catch that broader scope, that more diverse pool, you have to be willing to think, where is this research field going, right? Where do we want to see it go? And allow for broader possibilities other than cloning or the legacy of the current research that's being done.
Thank you, Ms. Ozan and Dr. Cooper. I mean, those strategies that you all provided were so incredible, and I just appreciate you all taking your time out to really dive into that question again. Well, this concludes the questions that I have for this episode. I want to thank Dr. Cooper and Ms. Ozan for joining us today to share their expertise and insight as it surrounds diversity, equity, and inclusion. But before we go, I do have another question to ask you both. How has your affiliation with the Black Doctoral Network helped to enhance you personally and or professionally? Dr. Cooper.
Absolutely. I'm really excited about this question. I've recently been able to, or I have the pleasure of having an institution that is a sponsor of the Black Doctoral Network. So that's really exciting. This resource has been really pivotal to some of the work that I do. And so I lead our future faculty program designed to identify and target individuals from underrepresented communities, African Americans, of course, being one of them, and provide kind of a resource to help, expand the faculty diversity at the institution. And so we are very much intentional about, communicating this commitment to diversity, but at the same time, providing access to scholars that traditionally departments at the university have increasingly found themselves having more difficulty in locating and finding. And so I've been able to, share this work with your vast network, and that has resulted in, more diverse scholars reaching out and applying to the program or bringing more awareness to the work that we're doing or trying to advance at Virginia Tech. So it has been, certainly professionally wonderful. And certainly personally, I feel like I'm doing my part, to support communities and really live and walk the talk, that I do professionally.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. Ms. Ozanne.
Yes. So I will say professionally, as someone who attended predominantly white institutions, um, and not necessarily recognizing that I had the black and the ivory experience, um, being a member of BDN uh, has given me that validation that um, my identity as a black scholar uh, is something special. And that when I attended my first time at the conference, that was just walking into a space where I felt I saw myself in others, and I felt welcomed, and I felt encouraged, and I felt inspired. And so that's my personal piece. And so I enjoy and I love seeing the ways that BDN has grown and continues to grow and to branch out, because now I am sending students to the conference who are also able to benefit from that, from being in a space where they aren't the only black person in the room, where they're able to see hundreds of black scholars, black doctorates, is again like that self-validation of I belong in this space, I belong in academia, I can thrive, I see others who are doing it, I can do it too. And so professionally, it has been connection to a network where I can identify mentors and collaborators for my students and for myself, but then also, again, raising the elevation of Black scholarship in general by highlighting the successful, thriving, innovative members of BDN, and just the organization itself, that it exists, right? Is a challenge to this notion that we are unicorns, or that we are not in academia in the numbers or in the spaces, in the fields, the disciplines. We're here, and BDN helps to raise that awareness, helps to elevate the members, and to build that community across the globe. So I'm grateful to BDN, and I really enjoy and appreciate each of my interactions. Whether it's through the Conversation Starter series, attending the conference, or just interacting with members via email or other spaces.
Thank you, Ms. Ozanne. Well, it's October 1st, and this is a very special month. As you both already know, and just to share with our viewers, we are having the 10th annual Black Doctoral Network Conference happening this month in a couple of weeks. And I just want to hear from our two scholars here. What do you all look forward to at the BDN conference this year? Dr. Cooper.
Absolutely. So it will be my first conference in person. I'm relatively new in my position as assistant provost, and when we joined the network, when the institution joined the network in 2020, we were still, of course, in the midst of this, or the early stages of the pandemic. And so my interaction has been very much disconnected due to the nature of the pandemic. And so I'm really excited. I mean, Ms. Ozanne has shared her experiences. And so I'm very much looking forward to opportunities to network and to just be around scholars who are like me, who are curious, who have, these burning questions, who want to continue to advance the work and mentor others, and, who I can perhaps, receive support and mentorship from. So, just taking in my first experience is something that I'm really looking forward to.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. And Ms. Ozanne?
I unfortunately am not going to be able to attend in person this year, but I am sending students, and so I'm looking forward to engaging with them and hearing the enthusiasm that they bring to the conference. And then when they come back, you really see a change in their personality and their engagement and how they carry themselves. And so I'm just really looking forward to the ways that BDN helps to invigorate them and inspire them and support them, and that they're able to bring that back to the campus and continue in that infusion of Blackness and the Black identity and the Black experience on our campus. And so I'm just really excited for the benefits that the conference provides to student development, student support, student engagement, and just appreciative of the space that's provided. It's unique.
Thank you, Ms. Ozan. And yes, it will be unique and amazing. But I want to again thank you, Dr. Cooper and Ms. Ozan, for taking your time out to share your wonderful insight into this topic that we've shared with our viewers today. Before you go, I just wanted to take an opportunity for you all to leave a bit of contact information should our viewership have additional questions or want to get in contact with you. Ms. Ozan.
Absolutely. Folks can reach me. I'm at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego. And so my email address is K, A as in Apple, U, Z as in Zebra, ENNE at UC, University of California. So UC San Diego, ucsd.edu. And yes, please feel free to reach out. I love getting questions and follow-up and connections from folks who've seen the talks or that I've met through the network. So that's also a special relationships that I really, really appreciate.
Thank you. And Dr. Cooper.
Absolutely. You can reach me at either email address, efcooper@vtvirginiatech.edu or efcooper@alumni.iu.edu. So I look forward to making connections. You know, if you were inspired by this conversation, I'm certainly reaching out to you, Kiara.
Same.
Because I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to, you know, the audience's engagement and perhaps, you know, continuing, you know, this type of discussion, whether it be through this conversation series or taking it to, you know, another level with additional panelists. I really look forward to the possibilities.
No, again, thank you. Thank you both profoundly for a wonderful conversation. And if you enjoyed Conversation Starters and would like to keep up to date with the latest BDN developments, please be sure to check us out on phdnetwork.org or in person this month for the 10th annual Black Doctoral Network Conference, where you can register for the conference at bdnconference.com, happening in Atlanta, Georgia, from October 27th to the 29th. Please be sure to share this episode with your friends, families, and professional networks. I am your moderator, Fesse Alonge, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.